Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad that you are here joining us. I have a sweet friend and guest today, Kim Cusimano. Did I say it right, Kim?
You did. Very
Okay.
good.
Okay. I'm glad. I was worried that I wasn't going to say it right. Kim, you know that this season I am doing Help. I'm a mom who. And so I want to jump right in. And when I say that statement, how would you fill in the blank for that?
I would say help. I'm a mom who's raising Elvis. My child likes to do things out of the box, and I've had to adjust.
I love it. I love it. And I know the listeners, wait, did she just say she's raising Elvis?
I did.
So I know some of the backstory and I'm excited for the listeners to hear it. So let's start there. Let's go back. Tell us a little bit more about how you ended up raising Elvis.
Oh, I'd love to. Thanks for asking, Courtney. I'm the mom of four. Now they're all young adults, and Nate is our oldest son. And Nate was born with an unusual condition. It's got a big, long medical name that we don't need to use today, but it came with developmental delays. One geneticist, when Nate was very young, told us to research and read up on Asperger's, that there would be some overlap with this syndrome that Nate had. And as we researched about Asperger's, we learned early on that there can be a tendency to fixate on favorite
Mhm.
things or something that interests them. And as Nate got older, that proved to be true. And when he was a teenager, he discovered Elvis. And I really thought it would run its course, Courtney, kind of like Lego season, Batman. I mean, some of them stayed around for a couple of years, but eventually
Yeah.
made their exit, right?
Yeah.
But we're going on about 10 years of Elvis now. And Nate is 28 and he has Elvis replica clothing and so many things. It would take us all day to list. But he's been a collector. He's very knowledgeable. He remembers a lot of details about Elvis. And I've watched more Elvis documentaries than I would care to admit.
I bet. I read a portion of your book that you sent me, and you also have another son that wears a uniform as well.
I do. Our son Ben is our third child. We had boy, girl, boy, girl. And Ben is serving in the Navy right now, and he's internationally deployed. Just he got to be home for a few weeks just a few months ago, and then it was time for us to say goodbye for his second tour of international deployment. So yeah, I
Mhm.
have one that wears Elvis clothing and one that often will don his Navy whites.
Yeah. When you said that in the book, I thought that was so cute that what you had expected as a mom looks drastically different because this is the son that also you were really concerned when he driving a lawnmower, I believe, as a child, and you were like, this kid will never drive a car, and now he's like
Yes.
driving naval ships or something. It was, yeah,
Exactly. I said in that story that we didn't know enough to worry when we were trying to show him how to drive the riding lawnmower and he kept hitting large tree roots and bumping the fence. We were just worried about him eventually driving. And
yeah,
God spares us sometimes from the concern of knowing that he would even drive a $1 billion Navy ship. But,
right.
God is faithful, isn't he, to grow them up?
Yes, yes, and for his purpose and for
Yes.
his plan and not always for ours. So let me ask you this. How has this situation with your son and with four children in general, how has it impacted your identity as a mom?
Right now, I'm reflecting back, even starting about 10 years ago, as Nate started to show interest in Elvis. And right now, I feel like I'm in the side of we celebrate the years and the joy that we've discovered in his interest. But way back when, honestly, it was a little confusing. And some of your listeners may be special needs moms. I like to say that my son has differing abilities. He has a lot of ability, but yet it
Mhm.
is different. And it's so funny that we spend so much energy, especially with our differing abilities children, trying to make them fit in. We want them
Yeah,
to hit the norms. We want them
yeah.
to hit milestones. Norms like playing sports or music or things that other children are doing. And
Mm.
sometimes that's not what catches their attention. And maybe it is because of their differing abilities. A child that might be on the spectrum and might fixate on an interest that's way outside of the box. Or it may just be because an interest caught their attention for any kind of reason. But I did discover deep down, even in my prideful mom heart, I wanted to fit into.
Yeah.
And when my child was wanting Elvis clothing, other moms were ordering sports equipment. And I didn't. Some of it was odd questions that my husband and I had when I look back on it. For example, Courtney, some of this replica clothing that our son wanted was very expensive. And we found it hard to justify buying it for him. I know many years ago, after we had given him, we started small, like a shirt. And believe me, there are certain websites that sell authentic replica Elvis clothing.
Wow.
Y'all can
Didn't know
Google them
that.
in your free time.
Yeah.
But he would get on these sites and he would put this stuff on his Christmas and birthday list. And we would get him a shirt or something kind of like that. And so I had a friend at one point say, Kim, what is he going to do with all this stuff? And what she was really implying, Courtney, is, are you making a wise mom decision?
Mm,
And doesn't that seem odd? That would even make me feel insecure.
yeah.
But he had a right to those kind of gifts. And it really reflected his ability and his interest. And I've come to learn all these years, even how God gifted and wired him up. And so it's funny how the smallest things can really target our mom insecurities. So
Mm.
that's just an example.
Yeah, but you're so right about that. And it's outside of the box, and people don't understand outside of the box. And it does feel, it can feel really lonely. And so, were there times throughout this love of Elvis and these differing choices that he was making, things that he was interested in that did not fit inside the box? Were there times that you found yourself wrestling with comparison or even loneliness as a mom because it was a different path than what maybe everybody else was doing?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, in the example I just gave about purchasing him some of these things, you felt like you need to justify to those around you. I remember saying things like, "We just got him
Mm,
one thing for Christmas.
mhm.
It was Elvis or whatever." And so we don't even realize we're justifying sometimes in decisions that we make that we think, in reality, God gave us the freedom to make those decisions.
Yeah,
And other people and other moms are not always going to understand that. And I will
yeah.
say, Courtney, over years, what we experience, we often have more compassion for. And
Mhm.
so sometimes now, if a mom says, "Oh, this is a little odd," or she goes to preface a story about one of her children, I have a sense of understanding and compassion saying, "Oh, one, you can't shock me. And I live with Elvis. So please
Yeah.
feel free to share." It helps bless other people too, that you
Right.
understand.
It's funny that we're talking about this today because earlier I was in the car and I was scrolling on some Instagram and I came across a young man who uses Rubik's cubes and he turns them to where the color lines up and he creates portraits out of Rubik's cubes, like
Amazing.
incredible, mind-blowing, like replicas of people's faces. And so he's done Michael Jackson. He probably has done Elvis. I'll have to dig
Probably
now
so.
and see if I can find it. But you know what I thought when I was watching this kid and his incredible talent that he has? I thought to myself, that there's a mom behind this boy that at some point probably was like, put the Rubik's Cube down. We need to go do X, Y, and Z. Or why do you always have to have the Rubik's Cube? Or go to bed. You can't keep trying to play with the Rubik's Cube. And I think
That's
that
right.
happens so often. And God's, wait, hold on. I've got something really special and creative and a good work that I can do. In this case, with a Rubik's Cube, and in your case, with a boy who loves Elvis. And
That's
so
right.
I want to jump to that next because Nate's interests and his personalities are now surprising you in ways that they are influencing other people. And God is using this man's love of Elvis for something so sweet and so precious. Will you share
Mhm.
with us what Nate is doing with his Elvis love?
Oh, hands down, Courtney, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about in regards to Nate. A handful of years ago, about 6 years ago, we found a dance studio that they would take dancers of all abilities. They had regular classes, but Actually, the majority of their dance classes were for special needs or differing abilities of all ages, all through adulthood. And so we didn't know it at the time, but when we got involved in this special needs dance studio, one of the things they do is they would take their dancers to things like senior centers and independent living and anything kind of like that. Also, festivals and groups were, great places to take their dance groups. But the senior centers, oh my, the first time he went, of course, he told his dance teacher early on, probably the first day he met her, that he loved Elvis. And so the first few years he danced at the studio, all of his dance routines were to Elvis music. Eventually, she encouraged him to branch out.
Of
But he
course.
would take those dance routines to Elvis music to these senior centers. And this has been years now. And honestly, I had just now recently, the last few times, have stopped crying. When I would take him and I would watch, and the first time was just phenomenal. If you can picture a front row of older ladies, a little more
Mhm.
seasoned, who grew up with Elvis's music.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, one of the first major pieces of replica clothing that Nate purchased with saving his money was the red Burning Love jumpsuit. And Nate has black hair. A little side note, little chasing the rabbit just a moment. All of our children were adopted from Korea. So one of the humorous points is Nate is really a Korean Elvis, which is really hysterical, but he pulls it off. It's amazing. He's got black hair and he puts on that red jumpsuit with studded gold studs. And those women go crazy in their wheelchairs and their walkers. They want to take pictures with him after he's had a couple kisses on the cheek. But if you could see the joy, when I saw the
Mhm.
joy in these in the audience, some men too, but the
Mhm.
joy that he brought the first time he put on that suit and danced, and it took me about the next 50 or 60 times to stop having tears roll down my face because he
Mhm.
moves people so much. He got where one of his ideas is he wanted to order scarves, like 30 at a time, so he could give them away like Elvis.
Oh
So
my
he will
goodness.
usually give 4 or 5 ladies in the audience an Elvis scarf. And
Oh my
Courtney, I
gosh.
swear you would think that they think that it's Elvis in the flesh,
Oh,
but
I bet.
you just cannot measure the joy in the room. And sometimes some of those iconic songs, that first beat starts and he starts his little Elvis moves.
Yeah.
And I just am so moved at how my son moves people. I'm not
Mhm.
sure I'll ever get over it, honestly.
And you get to be witness.
Yes.
How fun and how amazing is that? What has been an unexpected lesson or blessing that you have discovered in this journey?
Oh, I think that God's plans are always bigger than our own. I think we often put limitations, whether it's on our own dreams and ideas for ourselves or even for our children. God's plans are big and they're good. And I
Mhm.
would even add they're creative. God is a
Mhm.
very creative God. In things that
Yeah.
we would never think of, He does. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned. And that when I was willing to join in and be supportive of Nate's ideas, however odd they seemed years ago when it all got underway, I have been blessed in just getting to play a part, any kind of supportive part. I've reaped blessings of joy upon joy upon joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking back now, do you believe that God's design for your children, like when you look back, do you see God's design for them now that you couldn't see at the beginning when Nate first fixated on Elvis? You were probably like, I was thinking this mom was with the Rubik's Cube.
Mhm.
Now, looking back on that, what would you say to the younger mom of yourself? Thinking, oh, I wish he wasn't fixated on Elvis. Can't we do something inside the box that makes more sense to those around us
Mhm.
and to me? What would you say to that younger mom?
I would say to always remain open to God's plans that we can't see. Just us being aware that we cannot see God's long term plans and that we need to leave room for our children to blossom in ways that we may not expect. And also, sometimes I think we feel a sense of responsibility to help them develop certain skills. Like an example, some of us, we really think it's important that our children take music lessons of some kind. Some parents feel very strongly about the role that sports play in building character. And so we have these avenues that are all very well intentioned that we think are for their good.
Yeah.
But we just don't know enough to, at the time, maybe in those young years, to expand the what if God has different or something
Mhm.
I've never thought of. And so to leave room. And when they do start to show an intense interest in something, that we actually take a pause before we worry. Like
Mhm.
we can check our own spirit and attitudes about how we feel about it. And that maybe hearing something like this would encourage young moms not to worry about something that, in fact, any interest our children have, when it really comes down to it, that interest probably comes from God in some sense. If it's an
Yeah.
interest deep within them that comes out, God has planted that interest for some reason. And the
Mhm.
actual interest may disappear, and years later, it may show back up in terms of a skill that they gained or something while they were working on their interests when they were
Yeah.
teenagers or something like that. So, anyway, just to leave room for hope and creativity before worry.
Yeah, that's so good. And especially nowadays when kids are spending so much time in front of screens. And if I have our youngest son who is very much into these figures, and we buy these figures and then he disassembles them, and he was starting to do some really creative things with them. And he came to us and he said, "Can I go to Lowe's?" Sure, we probably needed to be at Lowe's anyway. And he bought this insulation foam, and he asked for a hot knife, and he's just slowly acquired
Wow.
tools and things like that, and he builds scenes around these figures that he's now airbrushed and repainted. And we got a
Excellent.
3D printer, and he can spend hours
Mm.
out in the shop. Like sometimes we're like, okay, you have to shut the shop down, you have to come inside and
It's
go to
time for
bed.
dinner.
Yeah, and I do have to wonder, he's our sixth kiddo, and I've absolutely questioned myself. Would I have been so lenient with kiddo number one if he'd have said, "I want to disassemble figures and this is what I want to do"? Probably not, because as a young mom, I
Right.
felt like this is the box that we fit in and this is what we're supposed to be doing. And now I've learned a few things over the years, and I do want to encourage his creativity, and I do want to discourage the sitting in front of a device all
Sure.
day long and playing games. And so it's been a win-win. But like what you were just saying, you just don't ever know where this could lead, or how the lessons that he's learning and things like that. And I think sometimes we may think, oh, that's just odd, or nobody else is doing it. Don't let the enemy tell you
Mhm.
lies like that about your children.
That's
Like
right.
God may be fostering something in them that is going to be beautiful. And I think, though, Kim, the only way that you were able to do that is because of your faith. So, how has your faith influenced like your perspective and your approach to the uniqueness of Nate, and any challenges that you have faced with your children?
I think early on, and we didn't know how it would play out with Nate's health. We knew that we were adopting a special needs baby boy. And all of the details surrounding that is a story for another day. But God led us to Nate through a series of events. And we didn't know what to expect out of his long term health.
Mhm.
And in fact, the original first paragraph of information that we read about our son Nate was that he had no right eye. And Courtney, even though this wasn't pertinent to the Elvis story, our Nate also wears a prosthetic right eye.
Mhm.
And so he was born with a condition where his right eye didn't develop and his right kidney didn't develop. And then he had a heart defect that would require open heart surgery and so forth. And we got Nate we brought him home from Korea when he was about 7 months old.
Mhm.
And so he was a little baby that his right eye it was really malformed and very tiny. The eye was eventually removed through surgery, but it looked like he was winking.
Mm.
And one of the very first stories I ever wrote about Nate, I called The Winking Baby. And the very first picture that Joe and I ever saw of Nate looked like he was winking back at us in the picture. And so as we brought Nate home, it felt like each month of his life was like a huge faith and trust thing before the Lord.
Yeah.
Even he had open heart surgery about a year after he came home to us. And I
Oh,
can remember the tears and the fear. And he did great. He did absolutely great. And everything we worried about, God would just have Nate breeze through it. And
yeah.
so after a bit, you could just see the pattern of God's faithfulness. There were a
Hmm.
few times that Nate needed to get into certain specialists for testing or health reasons. And somebody would say, "Oh, you will never get into that specialist in very soon. That could be 5 months, 6 months." And I would call and they would say they had an opening next week. And
Yeah.
this is how it went with Nate. And I began to notice that God would be faithful to my child. He was my
Mm,
first, so it was our first experience parenting. And where I could not always make a way, God could make a way.
mm,
And so I see that now as it's played out in almost 30 years of Nate's life. And
yeah.
I have no doubt now, Courtney, as I look into the future, my husband Joe and I, we even have to consider now Nate's care, and one of our other children has some special needs when we may not be around any longer. And that
Yeah.
used to be a fear point for me. But
Mm,
what I've learned about God's faithfulness, now I take into looking towards the future. God
hmm.
will be faithful to my children, whether I am here or not. And
Mm,
I've learned all that just through parenting and these kind of examples of watching him just escort Nate into blooming in a way that
hmm.
I probably couldn't have intentionally if I would have tried.
And what a beautiful testimony this is, that the trust that you've had in God to show up during those really hard and exhausting years of surgeries and different developmental stages and things like that. And so, if I gave you a minute to speak to the mom, whether she has children that do have special needs or she's just got a house full of toddlers, what would you say to the exhausted mom who's trying to fix her children to make everything look normal, for everything to look put together, just the way I guess society and social media wants everybody to believe everybody's lives it. If I gave you a minute just to speak to that exhausted mom who's saying, I don't know what this is going to look like in the end, what encouragement would you give her?
I would tell her that more than likely all of her mom friends are feeling what she is feeling. So it uses too much of our energy that we don't really have to be insecure about what others are thinking or to try to compare.
Yeah.
Chances are the mother next door or down the street or at your class women's Bible study at church probably is feeling about all the same things you're feeling. And our energy, we would be much more replenished to talk to each other honestly in our friendships, to be honest where we struggle. And usually, if someone leads with honesty, the friend will follow. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we tell everything at inappropriate times, but I'm talking about sincere, authentic friendships
Mhm.
and our support systems within our churches and our families and our friend groups. And we will discover that we're tired together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in admitting that and talking about our fears and talking about the things that we feel insecure, like we're not measuring up as moms, if we will come together and be honest with one another, we will encourage and replenish each other. And
Mm,
especially if we will pray for one another. And if a mom's feeling that way, instead of us having the tendency to compare about all the everybody that looks perfect on social media, there's usually someone in our life that we know that we could really pray for or lift them
mhm,
up before the Lord or take them a meal or a quick text. And sometimes we need to shift our attention on what is real right in front of us. Because what
mhm.
is real right in front of us are often hurting neighbors, friends, family who are going through something so that we can discern the difference between what social media is and what real life is within our families and friends and neighbors.
That's a good word. That, yeah, because we can get so caught up in, and sometimes we can get so caught up in our own hard stories, our own
Mm,
situations that are difficult, that we do forget to look outside And we forget to reach out. We
Mhm.
just feel like nobody's going to
We
get
do.
us, nobody's going to understand. And, or I don't want to burden them. They've got their own burdens. But what you just said, sometimes people want to hear, hey, I'm in this with you too. Or we may not have
Right.
this
Right.
exact same story, but we've got stories and you're not alone. And we're not abandoning each other. And more importantly, God's not
That's
abandoning
right.
us in this story either. At the end of every show, I ask if there is something specific that you are praying for that we could join you in prayer. And do you have a verse that you could share with the listeners?
Yes, when I knew that we were going to talk about my son Nate today in reference to his love for Elvis, I thought of the verse that I submitted for as parents. We can have things written in their senior yearbook. And I had the verses number 6:24 through 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And I just wanted to say in reference to that verse, as I pray for my children, and you asked what I was praying for. And I do now, of course, consistently pray for my son who's deployed. Our youngest daughter's in college, and so she's starting to think about career choices. So I pray for her. Our oldest daughter is our other child that has some pretty severe special needs, takes a great deal of care, and is in our home with us and probably will be for our lifetime. And so I pray for her abilities and that we provide any service that we can think of to help her. And
Mhm.
then for Nate, of course, who I've shared about. And so as I pray for my own children, I just thought as I connected this verse back to Nate and how as moms we have all of these things that we pray for our children. When it says, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you, I thought, God, I bet as moms, you use us to help shine light on the face of our children. When we're
Mhm.
supportive and come alongside them, we can be one of God's instruments to help shine light and to be
Yeah.
gracious to them. So
Mm.
that as we pray for our children, we might remember that's how God's using us. So I
Wow.
love that. Even as God brought it to my own mind, it just ministered to me so deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. And to think how the usage of your face, I'm just imagining when Nate gets in his Elvis gear, he probably wants nothing more than to see his mom be proud and be excited and encouraging him in what he loves. And so the image of that, let your face being the
Mm-hmm.
Lord's face shining on to Nate, and that's in your countenance, right? That's in you looking at him
Right?
with those prideful eyes, with those loving words, those encouragement. Yeah, that's I had never thought of that verse in that manner until you just spoke it, and it makes me choke up because I'm like, oof, how often have I missed that?
Don't worry, I've missed it too.
Yeah,
But God
yeah.
did bring it to mind as I was just praying about today and I was reading over my notes. I was reading over the verse and I thought, wow, God, and just choosing to be supportive of Nate over all these years,
Mm.
maybe just a little bit, I've been part of the light.
Yeah,
And that's what we want to be as moms, right? We want God
yeah.
to use us in the lives of our children in the most positive way possible that really reflects God. We want to be a
Hmm.
reflection of God to our children.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And I love that he's going into senior homes, having parents that were just recently in a senior home. And I remember growing up, I had a grandmother and I want to say a great aunt that lived in nursing homes. And my sister and I were dancers. And then my
mhm.
daughter was a dancer. And so I've been in those environments where the
Yeah,
dancers and entertained. And in senior living homes, so many of those people are forgotten about. They don't have family, either they don't have family or they don't have family that comes to see them or spend time with them. And so I can just imagine the joy that you were just explaining, seeing. I know that when my mama was alive, if an Elvis would have come in, we'd have had to stop her from getting up because
yeah,
she would have been happy to dance and have a great time. And
right.
what a gift he is. I'm going to ask you this. Do you have video of him that you would share with us?
Yes, Courtney, I can send you some links of video that I think your viewers would get a kick out of it. There are a couple of pictures of Nate on I have a website called fulljoyministries.com. We don't have any videos on there. I should, when I add some other things to my website, add some links to videos, but I can certainly get them to you fairly quickly.
Yeah, because
Yeah, he,
this is, of course, a podcast, but I'm also doing it as a YouTube channel now. So,
yeah,
if with your permission, if I
sure.
could end this podcast with a short clip of Nate doing what Nate does well, that would be so fun. And then the listeners, if you're listening on the podcast, you may want to jump over to the YouTube channel so that you can put a visual
It'd be
to,
fun.
I've seen the pictures. This is precious. It is worth your time to take a look.
Thank you. It would be fun. And by the way, he is a high functioning special needs individual. He does work part time. He doesn't drive, but he works part time, does his Elvis gigs, and he's very proficient at social media, much more so than his mom. So he enjoys seeing. Feel free to comment. He will soak it all in. He
Oh,
considers
that would be great.
himself famous, similar to Elvis. So he
Wow.
loves all the feedback.
That I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing your
Oh, thank
story,
you.
sharing Nate's story. I have a huge smile on my face right now because like I said, I've seen the pictures and the story in general just is so full of hope and encouragement and really I think at the heart of it also us letting go of the control that we think we need to have as moms and really surrendering that to God and saying, God, what is your will for this child? What is your plan? And when his plan and his purpose and his will begin to come to fruition, like you said, you've been crying through all of his performance just recently. Can you get through it without crying? But you are getting to be a bystander in God's creative, masterful work in Nate's
That's
life.
right.
And man, what a fun place for us to be as parents when we can loosen the reins. Like it's
That's
okay. Like
right.
it's okay to not be in control.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers, and in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.